thank you for coming. This is going to be the panel on the ins and outs of evaluating engineers. And I know that there are workshops going on right now, so thank you very much for choosing us over those workshops. That's much appreciated. My name's Ammon. I'm the co-founder of Triplebyte, and we're a hiring marketplace. We help tech companies hire engineers. Before I introduce the panel, I want to give a little bit of a background on the topic that we're going to cover today. I don't think that I need to tell anybody here that hiring great people is critically important. Finding and hiring strong engineers is probably the single most important thing you have to get right to build a successful tech company. And evaluating engineers is a pretty key part of that. Deciding who it is that you want to hire to your team, interviewing them well, avoiding bias. It's very important, and I think it's something that we often don't talk about very much. We kind of just all assume. We think a lot about sourcing and about closing, but we all assume that if we somehow get an engineer in a room with a candidate, that engineer can peer into the candidate's soul and just know if that person is a good fit for the team. Of course, that's not true, right? Peering into people's souls is very hard to do. Evaluating engineers is hard. It's very important, and it's what we're going to kind of dig deep into today. So let me introduce the panel. First, to my left, we have Denali Lumma. Denali is a seasoned technology executive with over 20 years of experience. Her focuses include hiring and retaining world-class teams, as well as test automation, continuous integration, and scalability. She's led teams at Uber and Salesforce, and is currently Director of Software Development at Box. And then next we have Tim Wagner. Tim is the inventor of AWS Lambda, the world's largest serverless computing platform. Most recently, he's been the VP of engineering at Coinbase. He also ran the C# and Visual Studio teams at Microsoft, and has done open source work at the Eclipse Foundation. And then finally, we have Prachi Gupta. Prachi heads engineering for YouTube's commerce and growth platforms, and is also the engineering director for YouTube Premium. She's been at Google for over a decade, led a bunch of teams there. She's got a master's degree in computer science, and serves on the steering committee for women at YouTube. So thank you, everyone, for being here, three of you. Let's just jump straight in with a question. Denali, during your time at Box, how do you evaluate engineers? How do you decide who to hire? How do you interview? And how has that process changed over time?
Yeah, so when I joined Box about a year and a half ago, there was a really serious problem. We were having some big challenges delivering products on time, as well as hiring and building out the org chart that we needed in order to ship the products that were important. And so when I joined, I did a bunch of stuff fairly quickly where I basically reorged my organization to move from horizontal teams to vertical teams so that we could kind of create autonomous units that could move very, very quickly with as minimal number of dependencies against delivering value to the customer as quickly as possible. And I also developed a new process and a set of practices for hiring, so an internal program called 10x Staff, which was designed to basically fix our hiring problem so that we could meet our hiring needs and fill out the org chart that we needed by the end of the year. And so there was a lot of stuff that went into that. Hiring is a very, very big problem, and it's also just one side of the problem. It's one side of the coin. It's hiring and then retention. And so just like any sales problem, any business problem, it's a pipeline thing where if you have strong pipeline coming in, that's great. But if you are churning and you're losing your customers, losing your hires, it doesn't matter how many people you can hire. The end result is the same. So. It's a process, and it's all connected, and I think we have a long ways to go. But a lot of what we did last year to really sort of turn things around was around sourcing process, as well as kind of changing the mindset of the engineering manager. So that was actually a really big thing for us. When I joined Box, the engineering managers largely felt like, the recruiting team is failing to hire. And it's like, okay,
Yep.
let's turn that around. So first of all, you're an engineering manager. It's actually your job. And the recruiting team is here to help you and to support you, but actually it's your job to hire, it's your job to retain, and by the way, you're going to be evaluated on this. So we actually put very, very clear messaging around, quotas for engineering managers weekly in terms of sourcing, as well as performance evaluation being tied to the ability to hire as well as retain, et cetera. And that really helped us a lot. We also expanded our sourcing efforts, and Triplebyte was a huge help for us in terms of sourcing. So we did a lot of work. We also tried to work with Carrot as well. We thought that was a very helpful service too. So yeah, that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg, but part of what we did.
Tim, I noticed you reacted when Denali brought up kind of the relationship between recruiting and hiring managers. Do you have any sort of thoughts on how that should be structured?
Yeah, I think like a lot of engineering managers, as I was kind of getting started in my career, I always thought of this as somebody else's problem. And I remember getting to Amazon and somebody telling me, okay, you need to go hire a team. And I'm like, that's great. Who will my recruiter be? And they said, you should go to the bathroom and check out the mirror. And I was like, oh. And that was sort of the first time it dawned on me that, it was a responsibility that actually does fundamentally sit with the manager, with the team owning it, that recruiting is a fantastic partner, but that it really works best when it is a strong partnership. And so we do some of the same things now at Coinbase, and I've seen this successfully at other companies where the engineering managers carry OKRs or goals, whatever that formalism happens to be around the hiring. Generally, they're involved at the very top of the funnel, so referral drives and some of these other sourcing materials. Like I've actually gotten engineering manager seats often for folks on LinkedIn as a result of it. And I'm very inspired by also this, what I would call the increasing professionalism of the technical recruiting challenge, right? Whether it's Triplebyte or Carrot, but it's kind of systematizing the process, I think, is a really, really critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's what I think about all the time. But Prachi, so you were telling me backstage that you have been more focused on sort of senior and leadership hiring. How is hiring leaders, engineering leaders, different from hiring ICs?
Right. So first of all, like +1 to hiring being a partnership with recruiting and eng managers, and the onus is likely more on the engineering managers. But I've been hiring and involved with all kinds of hirings in my teams, starting from entry-level engineers to senior engineers. But I guess for senior engineers, a lot of it is not just like this technical interviews is one part, but then it's like, what is the fit in the team? What's the role fit? But I think one thing that I'm finding is, I've been empowering my managers to, when they're hiring, hire as if they're hiring for their own company. What it means is hire for the long term, right? Just don't hire for this initial role. Hire for, is this person a fit in this company, in this role? And then build that relationship. Make sure that you create an environment where folks can grow and thrive, and feel empowered to export talent, right? Beyond your team to other teams, beyond your product area, PA that we call it at Google and YouTube, beyond even Google, right? So what happens is when you're looking out for these candidates and make these connections, a lot of them even will come back. But for senior hiring, like networking and especially internal hiring, has been pretty successful for our teams. And it's just that these folks know that you're looking out for them, and it's an environment where they can thrive and grow, and their interests are aligned with the work that they would be doing. That has gone a long way in getting the best candidates for senior positions. Yeah.
And I like that comment about hiring for the long term. It reminds me of experience I had working at Uber, where I actually grew my organization there from 1 to 80 in the course of about 9 months. or so, and it was insane. I mean, just insane hiring pace. And I think at some point you hit a velocity where it's no longer actually stable, right? Because you're hiring people, but you don't necessarily have the structure in place in terms of the management structure or the mission and vision of the team, or the work clearly defined. And so I think there's a balance between sort of rapid hiring and then hiring for the long term and making sure that when you hire someone, what they're going to be doing, not just this quarter, the next 6 months, but over the next 1 to 2 years, and that is well thought out.
And there's like a meta problem there too, that when you want to hire rapidly, you need to think not just about the ICs, because of course they're the ones who are going to do the work for you, but your managers are your source of so much of that hiring, as we just discussed. So much of the source of the energy in that system. And so making sure you're planning ahead to have enough managers at a senior enough level by looking around the corner and projecting out so that they can actually help you with that process along the way. I've certainly had the challenge of being successful at hiring ICs and then having no one nowhere to put them, or of forgetting to hire managers, just a mistake I've made in the past, like not hiring enough managers and then having too much hiring to do personally and not realizing that I've forgotten about the importance of that leverage.
So I think one thing that we do is, I tell my managers, be rooted in reality, but then a little bit of time you will be living in the future, right? So just don't think about who do you need now, think about where we're going and who will you need in a year's time.
Yeah.
And then because either you, and I believe a lot in kind of also growing from within. And so, if these leaders who are doing these jobs, what is the kind of job they'll be doing in a year? And are they ready for it? And if they're not, then how do we make them ready? Like, what kind of training do they need? What kind of, small projects do they need? Sandbox projects? What is it that they need next year? And so keep doing this again and again. So make sure you have, the whole org is ready to do what the business needs and, keep evolving.
At Triplebyte, we help hundreds of companies hire, and we talk to them about what they're looking for, and we actually see that kind of ratio of junior to senior. Probably 3/4 or more of the companies we speak to feel like they have insufficient kind of senior. It's actually more senior IC, I think, who can mentor junior candidates. That's a very common kind of situation to be in that we see. So a follow-up question to that: to what extent is it important for engineering managers to retain strong individual IC engineering skills? So would you hire someone who has strong leadership skills, strong mentorship skills, great manager, but who's become somewhat rusty at the actual art of programming? Any of you, let's say.
I would say depends.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
Depends on the role,
Yeah.
right? Like, in projects and in teams, you need all kinds of people, and so depend on the needs of the team. You not everybody needs to be coding, but I do also believe that you should. It's kind of like you're building, a beautiful building with Lego pieces, right? And at some point, some people are responsible for the architecture of it, but it would help them to know what are the latest Lego pieces in town, right? And if there are new ones coming up. So at least that much they should know so that they can direct their teams in the right direction, or if there's still really nice, efficient Lego pieces coming, they would at least know about it and work with the TLs and say, let's go take a look at it.
I like what was said, and I think it sort of aligns a lot with my own principle, talking about first principles, which is hiring people for their strengths rather than their weaknesses. So I think it's really interesting when we look at our industry and we look at candidates who, and I know because I've talked to many of these people who got an offer from Uber, were declined from Salesforce, got an offer from Google, were declined from Amazon, and it feels very, very random, right? Why are these people getting offers and rejections from tech companies within the same tier? It just doesn't make sense. And I think it's because a lot of the technical interviewing that we do still today is frankly arbitrary. I mean, we saw this at Box. We did an experiment, actually, very interesting. We had 2 people interview someone multiple times, and what we found in many cases was that for the same interview, the same person, 2 different interviewers had different recommendations, in terms of, yes, we should hire this person, no, we should not hire this person. So that kind of gives you a sense of just the randomness and sort of arbitrariness of not only the questions that are asked, but how they're evaluated, who you happen to be meeting with, which particular team at a given company. And so for me, what I like to do and what I've been trying to propagate more is this idea of exactly what you just said, which is, we want to hire people based on their strengths and what we know that they can bring to the team. And this kind of folds into the idea that diverse teams are actually higher performing teams. It's interesting, uniform teams do really, really well. Highly diverse teams do really, really well, but teams that are mostly uniform with just a few people that don't fit in don't do well. And it's an interesting sort of spectrum of performance where it sort of goes up and then down and then up again. So I guess in the goal of achieving the highest performing teams possible in our industry, I believe personally that hiring for people's strengths and looking for ways of augmenting the team with different perspectives and different attributes will actually lead to the best outcome, and that's how I like to proceed.
Yeah, I think this is something that we forget sometimes, especially with senior leadership, that our job is to compose highly functioning teams, and that is in fact part of the art and the science of doing it, not just getting more warm bodies into the room together who happen to all be exactly the same, and that becomes an important piece of the pie. I've seen this, and it's sort of a non-answer to the question, but I've seen it work both ways. I've seen incredibly strong people managers paired with incredibly strong, principal or staff ICs, where the two function in tandem as a unit. I've also seen models where, the manager is also the person who has a lot of domain knowledge, and at a minimum for me, and I would say like my litmus test is, can somebody, especially as a second or third line manager, can they audit successfully? Do they know about architecture when they see it? Can they ask the right questions? If I ask them what their SLO should be, do they have an answer, and can they tell me why? And that for me is kind of the crux of the matter, because then I can trust them to go flesh out a team underneath them with the right set of skills, the right set of kind of complementary capabilities, and know that they're going to be auditing that to success, even if they maybe can't write the latest and greatest code themselves.
Yeah, and just to quickly comment on diversity in general, I know it's a topic that we've all worked on, and it's been very difficult, and we haven't necessarily made the progress that we want to. But I truly believe that in terms of actually, building diverse teams with experience and perspective and education and training, as well as everything else, that we will succeed in that aim when we come to recognize the truth, which is that truly diverse teams really are higher performing actually than any other teams. And when we can start to correlate that more and more with business outcomes and profitability and sort of technical excellence, that's where we'll really see tremendous progress going forward.
Excellent points. I want to actually dive a little bit deeper into two topics that you brought up. So I'll go with one first. This is the idea that research into interviews shows them to be significantly more noisy than a lot of people think. And there is some, to be fair, there's some sort of selection of range bias here, right? We're looking at the people we hire, so that research tends to show, okay, of folks who get hired, there's a very poor correlation between what the interviewers thought in terms of someone who's just over the bar or someone who was way over the bar. So between that interview rating and ultimate job performance, there's close to no correlation. And that leads a lot of people to wonder, should we be doing interviews at all? Is it perhaps the case that interviews are so noisy that we should fall back on other ways of evaluating engineers? Do you have any thoughts on that? Okay, yeah.
So it is a tough problem, right? We need to evaluate. There's so many people applying for these positions. We need to evaluate, and evaluation is hard, agreed. But I feel like there has to be some way, and we can think about, let's just throw all of this out and then start from the scratch, or we can think about, let's take this and learn and evolve it. So I've been working with a lot of recruiting team recently, and and trying to see where are the gaps and where we can fix it, right? So it starts out with like data-driven, rubrics-based interviews to see that it's kind of as objective as it could be, but then this constant loop of like feedback and research and see what we can do. So recently we are actually piloting, standalone interviews for like leadership and googliness. Well, I should say what googliness is. It's like kind of to be successful in a team or on a project, yes, we need skills, technical skills, but also other things, right? Like someone who gets things done, who cares for the team, who puts the users first, or who values getting feedback and giving feedback. And so how do we evaluate it? And so we're experimenting with, just one such interviews. But then that's just the evaluation process. That's just this, this interviews process. But the whole thing, right, to Denali's point, to make diverse teams, so it's a whole thing. Like, as soon as you write a job description, that impacts who is applying for the job, right? Then the recruiters, the interviewers who are going to, the candidate coming in, how do they feel, comfortable, and what can we do? There's a candidate development team, which, are working with the candidates from, non-traditional backgrounds to see, we prepare them for this kind of, the whole marathon, which a lot of us are very used to, but, some folks are not. Then, we have hiring committees, and making those hiring committee panels diverse, so that you have different people there who can listen to it. And then, just experiment to see how these candidates are doing when we experiment with these things. Overall, how did they do? Were they successful or not? A lot of it also depends on the support that they get when they join, right? It's not like, okay, we got the best candidates in, and then there's no support, and so then they are like they will not thrive. So, making sure that support system is there. So there's a lot that goes on, and I agree that, we haven't solved all of it, but I feel like, open to thinking, and I had really good conversations yesterday with some of you on the thinking that's going on, like, so what can we do instead? But there's also this opportunity of evolving it bit by bit and making sure it's way better.
And making it data-driven, right?
Yes.
And I think this is one of the things that it's, if people pursued their product and their feature set, right, without data, you'd say, oh, that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. And I have seen so often recruiting is much more of a seat of the pants, like, oh no, we know a good candidate when we see them, kind of thing. So, being willing to drive it with data, study the data, correlate it with the feedback, I think, and then build that back in. Like at Coinbase, one of the things we realized was, some of our more immersive kind of engineering skills tests needed to be more customized to the type of engineer we were seeing, or we weren't being systematic enough in how we got feedback, like we're getting a binary answer from an interviewer instead of something that was more graduated and nuanced. Mm-hmm. And so becoming more systematic about that, and then I think as we said, there are even ways to start to outsource that and start to turn some of that over to professionals, which I think gets you to a whole nother level of it.
Yeah.
But becoming systematic, even something as simple as training your interviewers to know what a good, bad, or intermediate responses to their questions, as basic and simple as that seems, is sometimes super helpful there.
I mean, we've done two things so far to try and sort of address this issue of just randomness in terms of output. One is we've done more project-based interviews. So we have people actually, especially for our internship program, working on a project together rather than doing sort of a coding data structures and algorithms interview on their own, and that seems to be working really well. The other thing is we've now mandated explicit rubrics for each interview type, which is very, very clear. These are the things that we're looking for. Check the box if they have been observed or not, which is, I think, reducing a lot of bias and sort of, translation or interpretation that we're seeing. And then I think finally, the work that Triplebyte is doing and others in the space is really, really exciting and interesting because I feel like, with that data set, there's just so much potential in terms of standardizations, consistency, fairness, and really looking forward to see where you guys go with that.
Well, thank you. I promise I'm not fishing for compliments here. Thank you. I hugely agree. Just a little bit of context I'll add there. There is actually some really interesting research into this, and it's that seat of the pants gut call where research shows that most of the bias seeps in. So giving evaluators a clear instruction, this is what you're evaluating this one defined thing, here's a rubric, that's the single most effective thing that you can do to sort of decrease noise and decrease all the bad kinds of bias in interviews. Okay, we're a few minutes left here. I want to sort of copy Tom from the kind of product and eng panel right before lunch, and I want to do a underrated, overrated game for our last few minutes. So if you guys didn't watch that, I'm going to go through a list of slightly controversial ideas, and I might each basically go down the line and say, is it underrated or overrated, and sort of a few sentences describing why. Okay, so first we have take-home projects as part of an interview. So giving a candidate a project to go do that might take, I don't know, half a day to a day on their own time.
I think that's actually somewhat underrated. I actually think a nice way to move forward in our industry that would be, I would like to see is giving people the option of, what format would you prefer? Would you like to come in and just meet with a team and do some ad hoc, technical interviews on the whiteboard and, system design? Or would you prefer to actually, work privately at home with your own computer and IDE, on something that might take a little bit longer, but is something that you're just, more comfortable with? I think that's something I would like to see more of.
Yep.
Tim?
I would, same thing with the strong caveat that we also strive to be respectful of people's family time and other things outside of work, and knowing that interviewing is sometimes on top of an existing job. Agree. Underrated because of what it can show you about a candidate outside of what might otherwise be like a 30-minute technical interview.
Agreed, underrated, and also depends on the function, right? So for some of the functions, for UX interviews, we already do that. We have case studies and stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, need to find the balance of how much time this person spends on this versus the other job that they're doing.
Let's see, I'm failing if I can't find something controversial, since I'm trying to split the panel here. Let's see, algorithm problems. So so measuring candidates' knowledge of actual sort of academic computer science, big O notation.
I feel it's overrated because it's actually something that can be studied and practiced, and there are now whole systems, HackerRank and others online that are specifically designed to train you how to pass a technical interview. It's okay, but what about training to actually do the job? Because in fact, I've been working in software engineering for 20 years, and never once have I had to implement a doubly linked list in my entire career. I mean, honestly, I've never had to do that. So, it's just, to me, it feels overrated.
Okay, well, I'll do a panel split then.
Okay.
I will say, I don't know about strictly underrated, but I still think there's some value in ensuring that folks have enough basic computer science comprehension, right, so that they aren't sort of getting awash when things get complicated in some of these more challenging pieces. And I would say while it's true, have not had to do a lot of doubly linked lists, that folks who maybe don't understand a lot about the connection, say, between a graph and graph traversal algorithms for it, then find it difficult when we find ourselves kind of in the midst of more complicated pieces. So I think there's still a role, not the entirety, but still some role for basic computer science mastery verification.
So in the interest of keeping the panel split, I'll say depends. So I do agree with Tim that some kind of this, and because this knowledge is maybe you will not do the exact toy problem, but just understanding of basic computer science helps. As even you're doing the architecture, but depends on the role, right? In some roles, it's more so one of the things I was saying when you go to schools and you're teaching girls coding, it was coding. I see such amazing technical women who are helping with UX and other part data science. So this is not the only thing. So it depends on the role, I would say.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I think we're at our time here. So thank you everyone, and thank you especially to Denali, Tim, and Prachi.
And thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Evan.